Hi, I'm Ilona Varo. I am a marriage and family therapist and life coach, and I am going to be chatting here with Katy Zanville. I hope I pronounced her name right. I've been mispronouncing everyone's names, which is a pet peeve of mine. And we're going to be chatting about how to thrive through the holidays, in particular from a dietitian's viewpoint. Holidays are absolutely surrounded by food, food talk, diet culture, all the things that especially women really can find challenging during this season. So let's just dive right in. Katy, if you could give us a little intro of your practice and who you are.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ilona. My name is Katy Zanville, and I have a private practice called Katy Zanville Nutrition Therapy. It's completely virtual. I work with folks as a dietitian on intuitive eating, eating disorders, disordered eating, body image, PCOS, diabetes, kind of all the general nutrition support that people need. And I'm excited to be here for this conversation about the holidays. A lot of
Yeah.
people need support right now.
Yeah. So what do you tend to see around this season? What starts to kind of rear its head in your practice with clients?
I feel like I see two different elements of support that people need around the holidays. On one hand, it's a lot of, when you work with somebody who has an eating disorder, a holiday that is surrounded by food and gatherings that center food can be really challenging for people. So on one hand, I see people that need support with eating consistently or feeling okay with eating certain foods, having dessert. And then on the other hand, which you probably see more with clients, is the support around being your family. Maybe there's some difficult relationships, or maybe somebody's body has changed in the past year and they're struggling with being with family that makes comments about bodies or comments about food. So I tend to help people in both camps simultaneously, which we can dive into more of the details on.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on both topics because that's exactly what shows up in my practice too. Everyone kind of reverts back into their adolescence when they're surrounded by
Yes.
family. It's just very
Mhm.
interesting to watch. We are these completely different versions of ourselves in our day-to-day life. And then when we are back in that family unit, it is just kind of a free-for-all of what is going to come up emotionally and psychologically and behaviorally. So, can you
Yes.
kind of give us a little outlook and tip on what to keep in mind during those family gatherings in particular?
Yeah, that's such a good point that we can do all this work during the year and then November, December roll around and people really revert back to those challenging relationships
Yeah.
or maybe their younger self. I think regarding comments about families, comments about bodies or food, I really try to help people set boundaries. So, maybe in the beginning, before the holiday approaches, perhaps you want to have those conversations with your mom or with, that aunt that tends to make comments about your body like, hey, I've done a lot of work on intuitive eating or on my relationship with food and my body. I'd really like to avoid conversations around your diet, or I'd like to avoid conversations around comments about what I'm eating. And sometimes if you can kind of get ahead of the situation when you're not feeling activated in your body, that can be really helpful. Assuming that the other person is receptive and open to that feedback, which, we never know. But when you're in that situation, if somebody does make a comment about your plate of food, I feel like it can range from like maybe a gentle comment like, oh, I'd rather not talk. I'd rather you not make comments about my plate, or I'd rather you not make comments about how much I'm eating or if I'm eating dessert, all the way to maybe a sassier comment like, oh, that was kind of weird. Why did you say that? Or, yeah, that's actually not appropriate for you to say something like that about my body. Or you walk away, right? That's always an option. Can you step outside, go to the bathroom, maybe take a minute to breathe? It really starts with checking in with your body and seeing what you need in that moment and which response you feel comfortable kind of giving.
Yeah, I love the idea of having a conversation before the trigger. That's something we so often talk about in therapy is just getting used to habituating yourself to saying the words, setting the boundaries, practicing, because when you're activated, it's as if everything goes out the window.
I
the most
know.
well-rehearsed comment and boundary and
Hmm.
bonds can instantly, we're triggered into fight, flight, freeze, fawn.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the more you can rehearse, the more you can practice, you can set yourself up. And especially, none of this is new. I think if an individual has been struggling with their body image all of their life, which is most of the case, or even if it's a
Yeah.
newer
Yeah.
experience,
Hmm.
we know the people in our lives that are going to be prone to saying comments that could be upsetting versus
Hmm.
the people that are more supportive and understanding. So,
Yeah, that's actually another good point.
yeah,
Yeah, like how can we find that person? Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a cousin that kind of gets it, or a
yeah,
sibling, and how can you be close to that person or have a conversation with your supportive person beforehand, like, hey, if mom makes a comment about food or my body, like, can you just step in? Or, how can you kind of get that support ahead of time? I think can be
yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah. And you also kind of hinted, take a breath, excuse yourself,
Yes.
take a moment to pause. That would fall under the category of self-regulation. And
Hmm.
I really
Hmm.
find it helpful for people to practice taking deep breaths when they're having triggering meals and around people that are
Yeah.
maybe more triggering. Even if someone makes a comment, you can take a moment and just take a really deep inhale,
Mm.
exhale. You know,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and that can create the pause. And that can often help you not react in a way that's going to just escalate the situation because
Yeah.
even though the knee-jerk reaction might be like, shut your mouth or don't comment
Yeah.
about my food or my body, that
Yeah.
that can already kind of escalate even more intense emotion inside of you. So
Yeah.
I really think that just kind of, okay, noticing how did that resonate in my body? It's really
Yeah.
unpleasant, but let me be with my experience inside
Hmm.
instead of trying to engage outside.
That is such good advice. And I think the more practice that you can do on that interoceptive awareness, on feeling where those emotions are occurring in your body, is my heart racing? Am I feeling a pit in my stomach? And that way you can kind of use that in the moment to calm yourself down. And that deep breath really does take a pause. And maybe that pause in responding to the comment can give a signal to the person who made the comment, like,
Yeah.
hey, that was not okay. And
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah. And so often no response might be the best
Yeah.
response.
Yes.
So no response is a response in itself.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, and then related to food, that's a big challenge for a lot of folks that I work with. So how can you, like, I really recommend eating before the meal, not eating right before, but I think a lot of people tend to want to restrict, not have breakfast, not have lunch, depending on when you're having your big dinner.
I hear that
So
all the
probably
time.
the most common intervention that I recommend is eating regularly. Maybe you have a little bit more like protein and fiber with your meal ahead of time so that you feel more satisfied and full. For example, if somebody has binge behaviors, it can be really helpful to eat beforehand to not restrict. So I recommend that for everyone. Don't quote unquote save up for dinner. I think
Yeah.
balance your blood sugar, eat ahead of time.
Yeah.
You
That's
find that with clients
disaster.
too. Yeah.
Disaster waiting to happen. I literally, like
Hmm.
all of last week, and I'm sure this week too, we're going to
Yeah.
be having the conversation. Do not skip breakfast and lunch so that
Hmm.
you can feel better about your dinner because we've seen it, we've done it, we've been there, and you end up feeling
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
And it's unpleasant to go into a meal so far past the hunger point that's still tolerable.
Yeah.
Hangry is not a good look for the
Yeah.
holidays, right? It's just like you're setting yourself up for disaster.
Completely. And it's also not a great state of mind to be in when you're having those difficult
Yeah,
conversations with
yeah,
your family members.
yeah,
So I completely agree. That restriction ahead of time, restricting before any kind of meal is going to set you up for eating past that comfortable fullness.
yeah,
I mean, look, when we say Thanksgiving stuffed, when I'm talking about the intuitive eating scale, 1 to 10, like that 10 is kind of Thanksgiving stuff. People tend to feel like they need to eat past that comfortable fullness. And I think part of that is from not eating enough earlier in the day. or people thinking that they can only have these foods once a year.
Yeah, yeah,
And the reality is, you can make stuffing in July. You can have turkey whenever you want. So, this isn't the last time that you'll be able to have these foods. And kind of reminding yourself about that can help to listen to that comfortable fullness
yeah.
too.
That's a great question that I really wanted to touch on too, is how do you support someone when they've eaten past a comfortable fullness? Because that's something we talk
Mm,
about all the time. There's this regret, remorse, I don't feel good, I messed
mhm,
up, I didn't do it. There's this sense of failure. I went in really aiming to hit that hunger fullness scale at a comfortable level, and I
mhm,
overdid it, and now I have the
mhm.
urge to restrict again. How do you work with clients? Because that's such a common experience, I think.
That is really common. I mean, first and foremost, I like to remind people that Thanksgiving, whatever December holidays you're celebrating, it's like a few days out of the year, right? We're talking maybe a week in total if you're including holiday
Hmm.
parties. So
Hmm.
it's not going to make or break your health. It's not going to change anything about your recovery if you have a day that maybe you did eat past that comfortable fullness. So, really giving yourself that compassion and that grace that it's just one day, one meal. Second is, if you do feel really uncomfortably full, maybe you go for a little walk with a family member. Walking can help improve our digestion, bring down our blood sugar. So I think that even just getting outside and getting some fresh air can be really helpful. So physically, that's something that you can do. And then the emotional work is around showing yourself grace, showing yourself compassion. Like, it is okay that you ate past that comfortable fullness. And do not restrict the next day,
Yeah.
right? Not trying to compensate. Don't feel like you have to go to the gym tomorrow, or you have to, restrict a certain food group the next day. I think that's only going to put you back on that hamster wheel, that sort of binge restrict cycle
Yeah.
of just constantly feeling restrict, binge.
Yeah. And the holidays really highlight the relationship to food we have throughout the whole year. It's just this kind of
Mm-hmm.
microcosm, and we
Mm-hmm.
really play out the extremes of our behavior that we tend to maybe struggle with or battle throughout the whole year. So,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you find yourself having difficulties around the holidays, that's a great sign to seek support and do the work throughout the year so that there isn't such a focus on the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
because the holidays can literally just be another day, another
Mm-hmm.
celebration, another meal. If you've done, your work and you learn how to psychologically, emotionally relate to it, how to self-regulate, how to have boundaries, how to understand your body knows how to process the food you're
Mm-hmm.
eating. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to worry about it here. Your body automatically knows what it's
Right.
doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's just, I think, an important reminder that this isn't work that you pick up once a year. This is work you do all
Yeah.
year long so that during this season, it's not such
Mm-hmm.
a struggle. What do you think about that?
I completely agree. I think it's all insight that, okay, maybe this is something that I still need to work on, or maybe I'm still kind of struggling with this. And especially if I'm activated in a situation, I'm not quite in a place of recovery that I thought I was, and that's okay. It's all about being, more informed and observing versus judging
Hmm.
how you handled that situation.
Hmm.
So yeah, I completely agree that it just gives us insight. One of my a few favorite sayings that I like to use with clients is, how can we pull that information forward? Like, how can we notice that situation where, okay, in this scenario, I tend to eat past comfortable fullness. Okay, cool. Now we know for next year. How great is that we have that insight? And yeah, the second thing is, now we know. So instead of like dwelling and judging and feeling that guilt and shame about a situation or an eating experience, now we know for the next meal. Now
Yeah.
we know for the next year of what I want to work on. It really releases a lot of that guilt and
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah. And I think honestly, that sounds so simple, but it's one of the hardest things for
Yeah.
people because
Yeah.
we as human beings are just so good at beating ourselves up. I made this
Oh,
one
yes.
mistake. I did it wrong. Let me beat
Mm-hmm.
myself up. The belief is
Mm-hmm.
that if I'm hard enough on myself, I won't make the mistake again. And that is
Mm.
not at all. If you beat
Yeah.
yourself up, if you're judgmental, critical, harsh, you're gonna intuitively want comfort. You're going to, whether or not
Yeah.
you believe you deserve it, we're going to gravitate towards whatever behavior is going to give us a little bit of comfort. And that, especially if you have an unhealthy relationship to food, is then just going to perpetuate this cycle of beating yourself
Hmm.
up around your relationship to food. So, as
Yeah.
counterintuitive as it feels, compassion, understanding, curiosity is the way
Hmm.
to go, not judgment, criticism, and blaming yourself.
Absolutely. And just, yeah, just look at your lived experience. Like, how has that served you in the past to be really hard on yourself? How has it served you to be really harsh and judgmental? And what would it look like to be more kind to your body, to be more curious, and to
Hmm.
be less judgmental? It's a
Hmm.
really good reminder.
Yeah. Do you encourage clients to review their food rules around the holidays so that they can like do you think the holidays are a good time to challenge or practice, or is it more just kind of go in, get through it to the best you can, or
Yeah.
depending on where you are in your journey?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it does depend on where someone is. I think my initial reaction is most of the clients that I'm working with, maybe they're just trying to survive the holidays.
Hmm.
Maybe we're doing a little bit more distracting, or we're doing a little bit more of, okay, mechanical eating, which is the process of eating, every 3 to 4 hours and having the different food groups. I think because there's so much that tends to go on along the holidays with family dynamics, it's most people may not be in a place to get curious about what food rules they have and how they can work through. If they are in that place, absolutely, we can talk through that. And that can be a really great opportunity to get even deeper in your progress and recovery. But it's also okay if you're not in that place to
Yeah,
be a little bit deeper and
yeah,
to just kind of survive the
yeah,
next few months.
yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
think my question also brought up the answer or the point that we shouldn't compare. We're all in different
Yes.
phases of our journey, and
Mm-hmm.
how you're relating to your Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, whatever, is going to be completely different than the person next to you. So
Hmm.
stay
Yes,
in your
just
own
focus on
experience.
yourself. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
such a good reminder. And be kind to yourself.
yeah. I know that's simple and challenging quite often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What are some questions that clients can ask themselves? Let's say they don't have a professional they're working with. What are things that they
Hmm.
can just have in their own mind, or maybe they can journal about in going into the holiday
Hmm.
season? What types of questions do you like clients to be
Hmm.
introspective about?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you can just get curious about what are my tendencies here? What are my instincts? Or is my instinct to restrict? Is my instinct to go wild and eat whatever I want because I'm going to go on a diet in January? Like,
Hmm.
I would really, discourage somebody from thinking about dieting and restricting in the future because that's just going to fuel more of that binge restrict cycle. So really get curious about like what's coming up for me, and same with that interoceptive awareness. What am I feeling in my body when I'm in these situations? So am I feeling more increased heart rate? Am I feeling really tense? I think those are some questions to ask yourself, just like check in with your body.
Yeah.
And yeah, get curious about like where these beliefs came from.
Yeah.
Where's this belief that we need to skip breakfast and lunch before Thanksgiving dinner, or this belief that I need to, you know, cut out a food group for all of December in order to save up for Christmas or Hanukkah. So
Yeah.
yeah, just really get curious about what's coming up. And then that's something that you can bring to a professional, a therapist or a dietitian, and unlearn a lot of those food rules that
Yeah.
that we learned.
Yeah, a great way to check in with yourself, I think, like you're emphasizing interoception, basically being aware of what's happening for you internally. Your
Hmm.
breath, paying attention to your
Yeah.
breath is a really good indicator of what's
Hmm.
happening physiologically and emotionally.
Hmm.
Urges, paying attention, witnessing and noticing what is your urge? Is it to just say F it and go all in? Is it to
Yes.
sit there
Yes.
frozen and be afraid of the food, paying attention to
Hmm.
sensations in the body, emotions,
Yeah.
the thoughts that your brain is telling you. I think
Hmm.
if you can take a moment and kind of go through all of those five areas, you're going to be a
Hmm.
lot better off and you're going to know more about your own, like you said, tendencies. So awareness,
Yeah.
observation, know
Mhm.
thyself. That is
Yeah.
the best skill, I think, to build.
Yeah. That's our wisdom.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining and
Mhm.
sharing some of your tips for the holidays. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about your work?
Mhm. Yeah, so you can find me on my website, katyzanville.com. That's KatyZanville.com. I'm also on Instagram at Katy Zanville. You can book a 15-minute discovery call with me. We could see if we're a good fit in working together. And yeah, thank you so much for having me today, Ilona. I
Awesome.
really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I
Mhm.
enjoy collaborating with you. And so I hope you have a wonderful holiday. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
everyone, for tuning in.